The story you are just about to hear is not a work of imagination. It was the personal account of Whitley Strieber, an acclaimed American author best known for his horror and speculative fiction. In the mid-1980s, his life took an unexpected and terrifying turn when he claimed to have experienced repeated encounters with non-human entities. Unlike fictional tales, his story was written as a first-hand testimony, a sincere and often painful attempt to understand what happened to him. Whether seen as truth, trauma, or something in between, his experience continues to haunt and fascinate people around the world, blurring the line between the impossible and the undeniable. There are nights that seem perfectly ordinary, quiet, still, and utterly unremarkable. Yet sometimes, hidden beneath the calm, something stirs, something watches, something waits. That night began like any other winter night, deep in the countryside, wrapped in silence except for the whispering wind brushing against the trees. The kind of night where darkness feels thick, as if the sky itself is holding its breath. I remember sitting near the fire, reading, my mind half asleep, lulled by the steady rhythm of the flames. There was no reason to feel uneasy, no reason at all. But unease came anyway. It started as a faint hum, not a sound from outside, not the wind, not the wood creaking in the cold, but something else, a vibration, low, soft, almost like a pulse that wasn't my own. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the product of fatigue, but then the lights flickered. Not a simple flicker from a power surge. It was as if the room dimmed from within, the glow of the lamp retreating as though swallowed by invisible hands. I remember the way my heart began to beat faster, thudding in my chest, a cold heaviness creeping into the air. I stood up listening. The hum deepened, vibrating to the floorboards, and then silence. A silence too absolute to be natural. It pressed against my ears, thick and heavy, like the world itself had gone still. I called out once, my voice echoing strangely, muffled as though swallowed by the air. No answer came. I could feel something was wrong, but I didn't yet know what shape that wrongness would take. And then came the light. It appeared not outside, but within the room. Soft at first, bluish white, growing brighter until every corner glowed with an otherworldly sheen. It didn't come from the lamps, nor the fireplace, nor any logical source I could point to. It just was. My body froze, not from cold, but from something deeper, a primal paralysis, as if my will to move had been quietly stolen. My thoughts were racing, but my limbs were still. I was conscious, awake, but helpless. Shapes began to emerge in the light. Not human, not animal. Small forms, smooth and deliberate, moving with a slow grace that felt unnatural. Their heads were too large for their bodies, their limbs too thin, their movements too silent. Even before I could see their faces, I knew that whatever stood before me was not of this earth. One of them came closer, and when its face tilted toward mine, I felt a pressure in my skull, a sudden, piercing pain that vanished as quickly as it came. It didn't speak. Yet, somehow, I understood that it didn't need to. The air seemed to shimmer. The walls of the room melted away into a vast, colorless space. I wasn't standing anymore. I was floating weightless, as though gravity had loosened its grip. A strange sense of calm followed, unnatural and imposed, as if something was overriding the panic that should have been there. I remember flashes, light passing over me, voices without sound, sensations without touch. My mind was both empty and racing at once. I tried to scream, but the scream never left my throat. When awareness returned, I was lying in my bed, drenched in sweat. The fire had long died. My clock said it was nearly dawn. For a long moment, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't know whether the night before had truly happened, or if I had simply fallen into some fever dream too vivid to dismiss. But when I finally sat up, the air felt different, charged heavy, as if some invisible residue lingered in the room. Then I noticed a mark. On my arm near the shoulder was a small, circular wound, red, almost perfectly shaped, with no sign of bleeding or irritation. It looked as if something had entered and healed in the same instant. I stared at it for a long time, numb, unable to look away. I wanted to believe it was nothing, just an insect bite or the mark of pressure from my own arm. But deep down, I knew better. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen. I would wake in the middle of the night, certain someone or something was standing beside the bed. I would see faint lights flicker beyond the windows, hovering, pulsing, then vanishing into the sky. I would hear whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, like thoughts that weren't mine slipping into my head. Sleep became an enemy. Silence became unbearable. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the wind felt like a message. I didn't tell anyone. Who could I tell? How could I explain that I felt watched, that I could sense an unseen intelligence lingering just beyond perception? To the outside world, I appeared normal. I went about my day. But inside, I was unraveling. My memories felt fragmented, as though pieces of them had been neatly removed. There were gaps, moments of missing time, flashes of light, sensations that didn't belong to waking life. One night, I woke standing near the window, staring out at the dark forest. I had no memory of getting up. My hands were trembling. The mark on my arm burned faintly, pulsing as if alive. The night was deathly still, but I could feel movement, beyond sight, beyond sound. A cold dread crept through me as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. Between the trees, faint silhouettes moved, gliding more than walking, their heads tilted, as though they were observing. And just as quickly as I saw them, they faded, like mist swallowed by the night. I didn't sleep again that night. I just sat there, waiting for dawn, watching the pale light of morning slowly push the darkness back. But daylight brought no peace. The feeling of being watched didn't fade. It simply changed its form. I began noticing tiny details that shouldn't have been there. A chair moved slightly out of place. Objects shifted from where I left them, faint metallic smells in the air. It was as if the world around me was subtly rearranged while I slept. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoia. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. But every instinct I had whispered the same truth. Something had happened that night. Something beyond comprehension. And whatever they were, they hadn't gone. They were still here, watching, waiting. That was the beginning. The first tear in the fabric of everything I thought I understood. The first glimpse behind the curtain. The night when the familiar world began to dissolve, and the impossible became real. In the days that followed, reality began to loosen its edges. I tried to live as if nothing had changed, to cook, to read, to sit by the fire as before, but there was a crack running through every moment. The air itself felt charged, as if holding a hidden current that vibrated just beyond hearing. I started to notice strange details in the rhythm of life. The clock on the wall ticked unevenly, pausing the silence and then racing ahead as if time were trying to catch up with itself. The birds outside the window would fall quiet all at once, their absence forming a silence more powerful than any noise. It was as though the world around me had learned to hold its breath. Sleep was no longer a refuge. When I closed my eyes, I would drift not into rest, but into a void filled with whispers. Sometimes they came as thoughts that were not my own, half-formed phrases that rose inside my mind and vanished before I could grasp them. Other times, I would wake suddenly, heart pounding, convinced that someone was standing in the corner of the room. Each time, the air shimmered faintly, as if an unseen presence lingered there just long enough in my body to sense it even when my eyes could not. I began to keep a light burning through the night, but the light only made the shadows move differently. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling an invisible gaze trace across me like a current of static. I tried to reason with myself, told myself it was stress, imagination, exhaustion, but reason became a fragile shield that cracked a little more each night. I started hearing soft clicks, irregular and sharp, coming from the roof or the walls. Sometimes they echoed from inside my head. When I tried to trace them, they would vanish instantly, as if aware of my awareness. I became hyper-aware of the night sky. Each evening, as darkness fell, I would find myself drawn to window. There was a compulsion I couldn't explain. I would stare upward for long stretches of time, waiting for something I didn't want to see. The stars seemed too still, too precise, as though watching back. And then one night one of them moved. It wasn't a shooting star. It didn't streak across the sky. It glided, slowly, deliberately, changing direction against the flow of the heavens. A faint, bluish-white light, smaller than the moon but brighter than any star. I watched it move, stop, hover. It pulsed once, twice, 3 times, and then vanished as if it had never existed. The moment it disappeared, I felt that same deep vibration beneath my feet, a low hum that resonated in my bones. From that night on, my dreams became darker. I would see corridors of smooth metal, endless and dimly lit. I would see long, slender figures moving soundlessly through those halls, their enormous eyes filled not with cruelty, but with a kind of unfathomable detachment. I could never remember how I entered those places, nor how I left them, but I always woke with the same feeling, that I had gone somewhere very far away, and something had been done to me. Once, I woke to find myself standing barefoot in the yard. It was cold. My breath came in white clouds, and the ground was damp with dew. I looked up and saw the sky littered with stars, impossibly sharp, as though the world had turned into glass. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I looked down at my arm. The circular mark that had begun to fade was red again, warm to the touch. My heartbeat filled my ears. I ran inside, locked the doors, and sat on the floor until sunrise. I began to write things down, afraid that my memories might slip away. I filled pages with fragments, lights, sounds, shapes, emotions. Some nights, I would wake to find new notes written in my own handwriting. Notes I didn't remember writing. The sentences were incomplete, the words disjointed, as if written in a trance. One simply read, "They are not here to harm you. You are being shown." I didn't know what that meant, or who had written it. During the day, I found myself distracted by small patterns. Streetlights flickering in rhythm, a faint buzzing in the air near power lines, the ticking of the clock aligning with my heartbeat. I became hypersensitive to every detail, every vibration, every whisper of sound. It was as if the boundary between my thoughts and the world around me was dissolving. Then came the missing time. It started small. I would look at the clock and find that hours had passed without memory of how I'd spent them. Once, I woke sitting in my car, parked several miles away from my home. The keys were still in the ignition and the engine was cold, as if it had been there all night. I had no recollection of driving there. I searched my body for new marks. None appeared. But deep inside, I felt something different, something altered. It was not pain. It was awareness, as though part of me now carried a signal that wasn't entirely mine. And then came the voices. Not the incoherent whispers from dreams, but calm, structured voices, intelligent, patient, and eerily gentle. They didn't speak in sound. They arrived as thoughts, clear and undeniable. Sometimes they would say my name. Other times they would speak of learning, of connection, of something called the joining. The first time it happened, I felt the back of my skull grow cold. I wanted to scream, but instead, I found myself listening. The more I listened, the more the fear began to twist into something else. Not comfort, but curiosity. It was as though a small part of me began to understand that what was happening wasn't random. It had purpose. But that realization frightened me more than the abductions themselves. Because if this had purpose, then someone had chosen it. Every night felt like standing on the edge of two worlds. One familiar, one unspeakable. One built on logic and daylight, the other on shadows and silence. And as I stared into the darkness, waiting for sleep, I could feel them. Those same eyes, ancient and unknowable, watching from beyond the thin veil that separates here from elsewhere. The more I tried to deny it, the more real it became. Whatever had come into my life wasn't a dream, wasn't madness, wasn't imagination. It was something vast, deliberate, and patient. Something that had reached across the boundaries of human understanding to touch my existence. And somehow I knew it wasn't finished with me yet. Each morning began with the same hollow sensation, as though I had left some essential part of myself behind in the night. I would rise feeling weak, disoriented, half-present, my memories fragmented like shattered glass. Sometimes I would catch faint flashes of images, metallic walls, blinding lights, the feeling of being surrounded by beings who moved in total silence. Yet, whenever I tried to hold on to those memories, they would dissolve like mist in sunlight. There was no clarity, only the dreadful certainty that something had happened again. My days became a strained performance of normalcy. I went through the motions, ate breakfast, spoke with neighbors, pretended to read the newspaper. But everything felt artificial, like acting inside a play I no longer believed in. People looked at me and saw a man living his ordinary life. They couldn't see the nights I'd endured or the presence that followed me even in daylight. It wasn't madness. I knew the difference between imagination and intrusion. What I felt was real, and it carried the cold intelligence of something that understood me better than I understood myself. I began hearing faint tones during the day. At first, they came as short bursts of high frequency, barely audible but powerful enough to make my teeth vibrate. They would come suddenly, last a few seconds, then vanish. Over time, they grew longer, steady, rhythmic, like coded pulses. Sometimes they appeared while I was alone in the woods. Other times, in the middle of a crowded place where no one else seemed to notice. Whenever they came, I felt the same dull ache behind my eyes and an overwhelming urge to look toward the sky. That's when I started to keep track of the sky more obsessively. I would mark down the nights when I saw the faint lights hovering in the distance. They were never bright enough to be aircraft, never moving like stars. They pulsed in slow, deliberate patterns. At first, I convinced myself they were satellites. But satellites don't change direction mid-flight. They don't pause and vanish in an instant. One night, I watched one of those lights glide directly above the tree line, stop, pulse twice, and then accelerate upward so quickly it left no trail behind. My breath caught in my throat. In that moment, the fear I had tried to bury came roaring back. The nights became heavier. The air around my cabin would grow strangely still, as though the world was holding its breath again. Sometimes I would feel an invisible presence move past me, cold and weightless, but distinctly there. It wasn't imagination. I could feel the change in pressure, the way the air thickened as something unseen drifted by. My skin would erupt in goosebumps, my heart hammering against my ribs, and my instinct screamed to flee. But there was nowhere to run. They didn't come from outside. They came through, as if space itself bent to make room for them. Sleep, when it came at all, was shallow and haunted. I began to dream of a room filled with light. I would find myself lying on a cold surface, unable to move. Around me stood those same beings, small, silent, methodical. They moved like shadows given form, their enormous dark eyes reflecting a light that didn't seem to come from any source. I could sense communication passing between them, not through words, but through an unspoken frequency of thought. I could feel their attention focused entirely on me. It wasn't cruelty or compassion. It was analysis, observation. I was a specimen. Each time I woke from those dreams, the same thing would happen. My body would feel heavy, as if I'd run a great distance. There would be the faint metallic taste in my mouth, and my hands would tremble for hours afterward. Once, I found a small smear of gray dust on the bedsheet, fine and odorless, unlike anything I'd ever seen. When I touched it, it dissolved instantly, leaving behind a faint static tingle on my fingers. That was the first time I realized that what they left behind wasn't physical in any conventional sense. They were able to cross into this world and leave traces without ever truly being here. My mind began to split between two realities. One was daylight, structured, explainable, comfortable. The other was a night, the realm where reason fractured and truths I could never speak unfolded. I started questioning my sanity, replaying every detail in my mind, searching for logic. But the evidence was always there. The mark on my arm, the lights in the forest, the missing hours, the soundless footsteps that passed by the bed. Each piece on its own might have been dismissed, but together they formed a pattern too precise to ignore. And then came the night of the sound. It was past midnight when I woke to a deep, resonant tone echoing through the house. It was neither mechanical nor natural. It vibrated through the walls, through my bones, through my thoughts. It was like hearing the universe breathe. I sat up, heart pounding, and saw the faint bluish glow leaking from a hallway. The same light as before, soft, pulsing, impossibly clean. My body froze again. The air grew thick. I could smell something faintly metallic, like cold iron. I knew what was happening. They were back. This time, I didn't fight it. I don't know why. Perhaps it was exhaustion, Or perhaps I sensed resistance was meaningless. The light expanded, and within it, they appeared, 3 of them. Their movements were slow, deliberate, graceful. The air shimmered around them, bending slightly as if reality warped to accommodate their existence. The one nearest me tilted its head, and in that instant, I felt it enter my mind. There were no words, just a flood of impressions. Curiosity, patience, and something that felt eerily like recognition. And then the room was gone. I was somewhere vast and silent, a space without walls or boundaries, filled with light that seemed to come from every direction at once. I was standing, floating, on a surface that wasn't solid but still supported me. Around me moved figures in the same smooth, effortless manner. None of them spoke. None of them gestured. Yet I could feel their collective awareness surround me like a tide. My fear dissolved into numbness. I wanted to ask them what they wanted, but the question never reached my lips. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of being examined. Then one of them approached and lifted a hand toward my head. My vision blurred. My thoughts unraveled like threads. The last thing I remember was a flash of light, so intense it erased everything. When consciousness returned, I was back in my bed, trembling, gasping for breath. The light was gone. The clock read 3:17 a.m. Outside, the world was silent again, but I knew something inside me had changed forever. When the morning light crept through the curtains, it didn't bring relief, it brought confusion. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at my trembling hands, trying to piece together what had happened. The images were fragmented, flashes of light, the sense of being lifted, the blank eyes that had stared into mine. My mind felt hollow, my thoughts scattered like ashes after a storm. I could hear the ticking of the clock, but it no longer sounded natural. It ticked too loudly, each second slicing through the silence like a blade. I wanted to tell myself it was a dream, that it had all been a hallucination brought on by exhaustion or stress. But dreams don't leave marks. They don't leave you with the metallic taste of fear still burning in your throat. When I finally stood, my body ached in strange ways, muscles sore in places I hadn't strained, a dull pain at the base of my skull, and an odd stiffness in my joints. As I went to the bathroom to wash my face, I caught sight of my reflection and froze. Beneath my left ear was a tiny indentation. Not a wound, not a cut, but a perfect circular depression in the skin. It wasn't there the day before. I touched it, and a faint pulse of warmth spread from it down my neck. Panic rushed through me. I pressed harder, but there was no pain, only a strange vibration, as though something deeper than flesh was responding to my touch. I felt sick. My reflection stared back at me, pale, hollow-eyed, frightened. That was the moment I realized the truth. Whatever they had done to me wasn't just an experience. It was ongoing. For days, the mark remained. Sometimes it would tingle as if faintly electrified, and each time it did, I would feel the presence again. Not a physical presence this time, but a mental one. It was as though they were watching me from inside my own thoughts. I began catching glimpses, shadows moving at the edge of my vision, reflections in glass that didn't quite match my movements. Once, as I walked past a mirror in the hallway, I saw something impossible, a flash of a tall, narrow figure standing behind me. When I turned, the space was empty. Sleep became a kind of torture. The moment I began to drift off, I would feel a low vibration fill the room, soft at first, then building until it seemed to hum within my chest. I would lie still, afraid to move, afraid that movement might draw them closer. My mind would grow foggy, heavy, like falling underwater. And then the blackouts would come. Hours would vanish. I would wake up somewhere else in the house, standing perfectly still, eyes wide open, unable to recall how I got there. One morning, I woke sitting in a chair near the window, the sun already high, my hands gripping the armrest so tightly that my nails had left marks in the wood. I tried to remember, but my thoughts slid away like oil on glass. What frightened me most wasn't the missing time. It was how familiar it had begun to feel. The nights blurred together. I began to sense a pattern in their visits. It always began the same way. With stillness, the world would go silent. Even the insects would stop. Then came the hum, the faint blue light, the paralysis. It was like a ritual I had unwillingly become part of, one that followed its own rhythm, its own cold logic. And no matter what I did, whether I stayed awake, whether I left the lights on, it made no difference. When they wanted to come, they came. I began to write everything down. Every sound, every sensation, every missing moment. I filled notebooks with desperate fragments of memory. But sometimes when I went back to read them, I would find words I hadn't written, sentences that weren't mine. One page contained only a single phrase, written in neat handwriting that didn't match my own. You are being prepared. That message haunted me more than anything else. Prepared for what? For them? For something larger? I didn't know, but it felt less like a warning and more like a statement of fact, as if the process had already begun and there was no stopping it. Days became meaningless. The boundaries between waking and dreaming blurred until I could no longer trust my senses. The sound of the wind would twist into whispering voices. Patterns of light would move across the wall in ways that defied the laws of reflection. I would find myself speaking aloud to no one, asking questions I couldn't bear to answer. The more I tried to fight it, the deeper I sank into it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I decided to leave. I packed a few clothes, grabbed my keys, and drove without direction. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to be far away from that house, from those woods, from whatever had claimed me. I drove for hours deep into the night, until exhaustion forced me to stop at a small roadside motel. I checked in under a false name, locked the door, and sat on the bed, shaking. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe distance could break the connection. Maybe I could outrun them. But as the night deepened, that hope crumbled. The room began to vibrate softly, almost imperceptibly. The hum returned, faint but unmistakable. The clock on the nightstand stopped ticking. I knew then that it wasn't the house they were tied to. It was me. The presence wasn't limited by walls or geography. It followed wherever I went, inside my thoughts, inside my body. The light came again. Not bright this time, but soft, spreading like mist across the floor. I sat frozen, staring at it, feeling the same mixture of terror and resignation that had come to define my nights. The air grew cold. My breath condensed in small clouds before me. A figure appeared in the doorway, not stepping through it, but emerging from it, as though the wall itself had become liquid. It moved toward me with slow precision, its face expressionless, its enormous eyes reflecting my own fear. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But all I could do was whisper one word, a plea that carried no sound. Why? The figure tilted its head slightly, as though listening. For the briefest instant, I felt something like sorrow pass through me. Not mine, theirs. Then the room dissolved into white. When I opened my eyes, it was morning again. The door was still locked. My bag was still packed. But beside the bed lay something that hadn't been there before, a small metallic sphere, no larger than a marble, perfectly smooth, gleaming faintly in the light of dawn. I didn't touch it. I just stared, because deep down I already knew it wasn't a message. It was proof. For a long time, I didn't move. The small metallic sphere lay beside the bed, perfectly still, as if waiting for me to acknowledge it. Morning sunlight filtered through the faded curtains and struck its surface, scattering faint reflections across the room. It was beautiful in a way that frightened me. Too perfect, too flawless, like it didn't belong to the world of ordinary things. When I finally reached for it, my hand hesitated midair. A deep instinct told me not to touch it. Yet that same instinct, the one born of fear and curiosity, urged me to understand. I picked it up. It was cool, heavier than it appeared, and smooth like glass, though it didn't reflect light in the normal way. It seemed to absorb brightness instead of bouncing it back. As I turned it over my hand, a faint vibration pulsed through it. I felt it travel up my arm, steady and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. For a moment, I thought I could hear something faint within it, a distant, whispering tone that didn't seem to come from the air, but from inside my head. I dropped it immediately. The whisper stopped. Silence reclaimed the room. The rational part of me wanted to explain it. Maybe it was a trick of the nerves, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But a deeper, quieter voice told me that wasn't the case. I had experienced their presence too many times to dismiss it as imagination. I could feel them even now, out there somewhere, watching, waiting for my reaction. The sphere wasn't a random object. It was deliberate, a message, a connection, or worse, a reminder. That entire day, I didn't leave the motel room. I sat by the bed, staring at the object lying on the carpet as though it were alive. My phone had no signal. Every time I tried to call someone, the screen glitched, numbers vanishing, words flickering. Even when the phone powered off, the faint hum in the room remained. I began to feel as though reality itself was thinning, as though the world around me had become a fragile shell that could crack at any moment. By evening, exhaustion overcame fear. I placed the sphere inside a drawer, turned off the lights, and lay down, but I didn't sleep. I stared into the darkness, waiting. For hours, nothing happened. Then, sometime after midnight, the air in the room changed again, dense, charged, alive. The familiar stillness settled around me, and with it came that same deep hum, low and steady. My pulse quickened. I tried to fight it, to move, to scream, to prove to myself that I was still in control. But my body refused to obey. Paralysis spread from my chest outward, pinning me in place. My breath came shallow and rapid. Then, through the haze, I saw it. Not light this time, but shadows. 3 of them. Small, slender, moving with mechanical precision, gliding rather than walking. They surrounded the bed. I could see them only from the corner of my eyes, but I felt their gaze, those dark, endless eyes that seemed to look not at me, but through me. One of them raised its hand, and a faint glow appeared at its fingertips. My vision began to blur. I wanted to close my eyes, but even that was denied to me. The glow brightened, and then all sensation faded. When I awoke, it was dawn again. My body felt heavy, drained, my mouth dry. I turned my head slowly toward the drawer and found it open. The metallic sphere was gone. I sat upright, heart racing, and scanned the room. Everything was exactly as I had left it, except for one small change. On the wall near the door, written in a faint, silvery residue, were 3 words: "Do not resist." The handwriting wasn't human. The lines were too precise, too deliberate, as if drawn with some kind of instrument that wasn't made for human hands. I stared at the words until my eyes burned. Then, without really deciding to, I began to cry. Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion, a deep, soul-depleting despair. I stayed in that motel for 2 more days, sleeping in short bursts, waking in panic, unable to decide what to do next. I couldn't call anyone. I couldn't explain it. Even if I could, who would believe me? To them, I would sound like a man losing his mind. But I knew the truth. This wasn't madness. It was happening. On the 3rd day, something in me shifted. The fear remained, but beneath it, a cold determination began to form. I couldn't keep running. I needed to understand. I needed to know what they wanted. So I went back to the house, back to the woods, back to the place where everything had begun. The drive home was silent. No music, no radio, just the sound of the tires against the asphalt. The deeper I went into the forest, the more that strange sense of familiarity returned. The road wound through trees that seemed older than time itself, their shadows long and skeletal in the fading light. When I finally reached the clearing, I stopped the car and sat in the silence for a long time. The air was still. Not a single bird called. Not a leaf stirred. As I stepped out, a shiver ran through me. The house stood there, unchanged, but the atmosphere around it felt different, charged, expectant. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell of old wood and dust filled the air. Everything was exactly as I had left it, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone had been there while I was gone. That night, I didn't try to sleep. I sat by the window with a flashlight and a notebook, determined to record every sound, every flicker of movement. Midnight came and went. The hours dragged. I began to think maybe, somehow, it was over. But just as my eyes began to grow heavy, I heard it again, the hum. This time, I didn't resist. I didn't run. I let the paralysis come. My breathing slowed. The air shimmered. A soft blue glow filled the room. Out of the light, they emerged, 3 of the smaller ones, followed by something larger, taller. It moved differently, almost regally, with a strange grace that filled the room with silence. When it stopped before me, I felt its presence not as fear, but as an overwhelming pressure in my mind, a flood of sensations, of images too vast to comprehend. I saw stars endless and cold. I saw worlds rising and dying. I saw humanity, small and fragile, seen through eyes not meant to see emotion. Then a voice not spoken but felt, "You are beginning to understand." The words were inside my skull, resonating in the very core of my being. I wanted to respond, but no sound came out. My thoughts weren't my own anymore. They were being read, examined, filtered, and in that unbearable silence, I realized something terrifying. They weren't studying me. They were awakening me. The night after their last visit felt different. The fear that had once gripped me so completely was no longer the same. It had transformed into something deeper, quieter, almost reverential. I couldn't deny it anymore. They were communicating, not with words or gestures, but directly through thought, through something that bypassed every known human channel of understanding. The memory of that voice still pulsed in my mind like a living echo. "You are beginning to understand." Understand what? I didn't know. But the sentence replayed in my mind over and over until it became a rhythm that threaded itself into every waking moment. I could feel it when I walked, when I ate, when I tried to sleep. It wasn't a memory. It was alive. Days passed in silence. I began to notice subtle changes within myself. My thoughts seemed sharper. My dreams more vivid. Sometimes I would awaken in the middle of the night, not in fear, but with knowledge I couldn't explain. Concepts that felt ancient and infinite, as if someone had whispered them into my consciousness while I slept. It was as though I was being reshaped from the inside out, piece by piece. One morning, I went to the forest. The sunlight filtered weakly through the dense canopy, and the air was thick with mist. I didn't know what I was looking for, but something compelled me to keep walking. The forest floor was soft, the earth damp beneath my boots. As I moved deeper, the birds grew silent. Then I found it, a clearing, perfectly circular. The trees surrounding it bent slightly outward, as though something had once pressed them away with immense force. The ground was charred in a pattern I didn't recognize, burn marks that spiraled inward, converging on a single point in the center. I knelt down and touched the soil. It was cold, unnaturally so. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. I had been here before. Flashes struck my mind in violent bursts. The night sky illuminated by a blue radiance. The sensation of weightlessness. The sound, no. The feeling of an immense vibration coursing through my bones. I saw myself standing in this very clearing, surrounded by light that had no source, by shapes that defied comprehension. Then I saw their faces again, those large, black eyes staring down at me, unreadable, ancient. The vision vanished as suddenly as it came. I staggered backward, gasping for air, my heart pounding like it was trying to break free from my chest. I looked around, half expecting to see them standing there, but the clearing was empty, silent, still, and yet, the moment I turned to leave, I felt it again, their gaze, not from the forest, from above. I looked up. The sky was cloudless, pale, and infinite. For a moment, it seemed normal. Then, a faint shimmer rippled across it, like heat rising from asphalt. I squinted, trying to focus. The shimmer grew brighter, taking shape, a distortion, spherical and translucent, hovering motionlessly above the treetops. It was there and not there at the same time, visible only if I didn't look directly at it. My entire body went cold. I took a step backward, then another, and then, as if it sensed my awareness, the shimmer blinked out. Gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. My body was exhausted, but my mind was electric. I could feel them again, not as intruders, but as something ever-present, embedded in the very fabric of my existence. When I closed my eyes, images formed unbidden. Stars, constellations unknown to astronomy, enormous metallic structures floating in the black void of space. And something else, a planet, blue and white, familiar, fragile, ours. It was then that I began to understand what they might be showing me, not as a message, but as a mirror. Humanity's smallness, our blindness, our ignorance of the vast, silent order that moves beyond our sight. We think of ourselves as alone, yet I now knew that solitude was an illusion. Something or someone had been watching humanity since the beginning, waiting for the right time to reveal itself. And for reasons I couldn't grasp, they had chosen me. Over the following days, physical symptoms began to appear. Nosebleeds, sudden fatigue, a constant ringing in my ears, like a frequency I couldn't tune out. Sometimes I would wake up drenched in sweat, the mark on my neck burning faintly beneath the skin. Each time it flared, I would see brief, fragmented images, machines operating silently in sterile light, shapes moving behind translucent walls, my own reflection staring back at me from a surface that wasn't glass. Then came the dreams. They were unlike any dreams I'd ever known. There were no clear beginnings or endings, just infinite corridors of light and sound, walls that pulsed like living tissue, and presences that drifted just out of reach. I could feel them observing me, guiding me, testing me. In one of these dreams, I found myself lying on a smooth metallic table. I couldn't move, but I wasn't afraid. The beings surrounded me, their long fingers hovering over my skin. Instead of pain, I felt a strange comfort, a sense of belonging I couldn't explain. One of them leaned closer, its eyes inches from mine. And then, in my mind, I heard the same voice again. "You will remember in time." I woke up crying, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of knowing that something within me had changed forever. I began to withdraw from the world. I stopped answering calls, stopped seeing friends, stopped pretending that life was still normal. I knew if I told anyone the truth, they would call it delusion, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't trying to convince anyone. I just needed to understand why. Why me? Why any of us? Were they scientists, messengers, or something that defied all categories we know? The more I tried to find logic in their actions, the less human logic applied. I began to suspect that their purpose wasn't about control or invasion. It was about evolution. I remembered the phrase from my notebook, the one I hadn't written myself. "You are being prepared." At first, I thought it was a threat. Now, I wasn't sure. What if it wasn't about physical experimentation, but mental transformation? What if they weren't taking from us, but giving? That thought haunted me for days. And yet, deep inside, another thought began to grow. One I didn't want to believe. What if they weren't preparing me for something? What if they were preparing all of us? The days that followed were unlike anything I had ever known. Reality began to bend. Not violently, not in sudden ruptures, but in subtle, creeping distortions that made me question everything I saw. Time no longer felt linear. Sometimes hours passed in what seemed like minutes. Other times, a few moments stretched endlessly, as though the world itself were holding its breath. It was as if something or someone was tampering with perception itself, forcing me to experience reality through their eyes rather than my own. Every night, I would lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, waiting for the familiar vibration to begin. But now, it wasn't just fear that filled me. There was curiosity and something dangerously close to acceptance. I had come to understand that their appearances weren't random. They followed a rhythm, like the tides or the pulse of a great unseen machine that governs the universe itself. On the fourth night, it began again. The stillness, the soft blue glow, the faint hum that resonated deep within my chest. But this time, something was different. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't paralyzed. I could move. My limbs trembled, my heart pounded. But I could move. The light filled the room until the edges of everything, the walls, the floor, the very air, dissolved into it. And through that light, I saw them. 3 of the smaller beings stood silently near the foot of the bed. Behind them, the taller one, The same presence I'd seen before emerged, its movements fluid and deliberate. Its gaze met mine, and a flood of sensations rushed through me. My body felt weightless, my vision blurred, and in an instant, I was no longer in my room. The transition was seamless. No sound, no sensation of movement, only sudden placement. I stood in a vast, dimly lit space. The walls shimmered faintly, not solid, not metallic, but something between matter and light. The air was thick yet breathable, humming with low, rhythmic tones. I looked around and saw others, human figures, lying on long, narrow platforms, completely still. Some looked peaceful, others terrified. I tried to speak, but my voice was swallowed by the air. The tall being moved closer, and as it did, the hum grew louder. Its black, unblinking eyes locked onto mine, and suddenly, images began to flood my mind. Not shown to me, but implanted. I saw a vast expanse of stars, thousands of them, scattered like sparks against the void. Then I saw Earth, small and luminous, spinning silently in the blackness. I felt emotion, not mine, but theirs. It wasn't love. It wasn't cruelty. It was something beyond both. An observation so complete that it had transcended judgment. They watched us the way a scientist watches a growing cell, fascinated, patient, detached. Then came understanding, not through words, but through direct knowing. I saw the history of their interactions with humanity, fragmented glimpses of ancient times, when beings of light descended upon early civilizations. I saw drawings etched into stone, depictions of gods and spirits that matched the form standing before me. I saw thousands of years of contact, always hidden, always disguised as myth, religion, or dream. And beneath all of it, one message pulsed, repeating endlessly like a heartbeat of the cosmos. We have always been here. The images shifted again. I saw a planet, not Earth, bathed in silver light, covered in structures so vast they seemed to merge with the landscape. I felt an overwhelming sadness emanating from them, as if they had once possessed something they had long lost. A voice entered my mind, not a new one, but the same one that had spoken before, calm and infinitely old. You are becoming aware. I wanted to ask why. Why me, why any of us? But before I could form the thought, something inside my head ignited. It wasn't pain, it was expansion. My mind felt as though it were being stretched beyond its limits, forced to comprehend realities that no human consciousness was meant to grasp. I saw the fabric of existence as a living entity, threads of light connecting everything that ever was or would be. And in that web, I saw them, not as invaders, but as weavers. You are not separate from us. The phrase echoed through me until it became truth. I could feel it deep within every cell of my body. Somehow, I knew they were right. The separation between human and alien, between mortal and infinite, was an illusion, one humanity had constructed to feel safe within its fragile understanding of a universe. But the illusion was breaking. The light around me began to pulse rhythmically, each wave drawing me deeper into its core. My heartbeat synchronized with the sound, faster and faster, until I could no longer tell where my pulse ended and theirs began. I felt my consciousness drift, stretching outward, merging with something vast and immeasurable. For a brief, impossible moment, I saw through their eyes. I saw Earth from above, glowing faintly in the darkness. I saw countless orbs of light, souls, consciousnesses, flickering across its surface. I saw humanity not as a collection of individuals, but as a single, trembling organism slowly awakening to its place in the cosmic order. Then the vision fractured. I was falling through light, through sound, through the unbearable density of space itself. And then I was back in my bed. The hum was gone. The light was gone. But I wasn't the same. My body was cold, trembling, drenched in sweat. My vision swam with faint afterimages, shapes of light that refused to fade. I tried to move, and something rolled off my chest onto the floor. It was another object, small, smooth, oval-shaped, but this one wasn't metallic. It looked organic, like a pearl made of living tissue. It pulsed faintly, as if breathing. I stared at it for a long time, too afraid to touch it, too curious to look away. And slowly, I began to feel a faint resonance between it and the mark beneath my ear. A pulse. A link. That's when I realized it wasn't just a token from them. It was part of me. Something had been awakened. And this time, it wasn't going back to sleep. In the days that followed, I became a stranger in my own body. The pulse beneath my skin was constant now. Steady, deliberate. As though something deep inside was alive and aware. I could sense it in quiet moments, when the world around me went still. It wasn't just a physical rhythm. It was a communication, soft and wordless, but undeniably intelligent. I knew they hadn't merely taken me. They had changed me. At first, I tried to deny it. I told myself that what I was feeling, the warmth beneath the skin, the hum that only I could hear, was psychological, a remnant of trauma. But denial has a limit. And when I began to see the symbols, I knew there was no turning back. They appeared slowly, subtly. At first, they emerged in condensation on the bathroom mirror, faint circular shapes that vanished before I could focus on them. Then, they began showing up elsewhere, on windows, on walls, even burned lightly into the wood of the table near my bed. Every time I looked away, another would appear, smooth, geometric, impossibly precise, and always the same pattern. 3 rings intersecting at the center, forming an eye. I began to dream of that symbol. It glowed faintly behind my closed eyes, spinning slowly, alive with meaning that hovered just beyond understanding. The dreams were no longer fragmented or chaotic. They were clear, structured, almost instructional. I would see fields of stars arranged in unfamiliar constellations, massive circular structures suspended in the blackness, and beings that move within them, not walking, not flying, but gliding effortlessly through space. One night, the dream changed. I was floating above Earth, the curve of the planet vast beneath me. Then, from the darkness, an enormous shape emerged, cylindrical, metallic, yet fluid in its movement. It rotated slowly, revealing markings identical to the symbols I had been seeing. As it turned, I realized it wasn't just one object. It was a part of something greater, something infinite. The voice returned, calm and resonant. "You have always belonged to us." The phrase burned itself into my mind. When I woke, I could still hear it, echoing not in my ears but within my thoughts. I stumbled out of bed, drenched in sweat, gasping for air, the mark on my neck pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. My body trembled as if fighting something unseen. And then I saw it, reflected in the dark glass of the window, a faint, radiant glow beneath my skin, centered around the mark. It was no longer just a scar. It was active. Panic took hold of me. I grabbed a flashlight and rushed to the mirror. The glow was still there, faint but steady, pulsing with each beat of my heart. I pressed my fingers against it and felt warmth, alive, deliberate, responsive. It pulsed faster when I touched it, like a living creature acknowledging its host. Something was communicating through it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the faint glow beneath my skin fade and return in a slow rhythm. The air in the room felt heavier, charged with the same static electricity that always preceded their visits. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came again. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The clock ticked toward midnight. The silence grew thick. Then, just as my breathing began to steady, the hum returned. So low it felt more like a vibration in my bones than a sound. The walls of the room seemed to bend inward. The light dimmed to a deep gray, and the air shimmered faintly. I felt the familiar tingling crawl across my skin, and then movement. They emerged from the light without sound. The smaller ones first, their motions fluid, their limbs impossibly long and thin. Then the tall one stepped forward, the same being I had seen before. Its presence was overwhelming, not threatening, but immense, as though the very air bowed beneath its existence. I felt its thoughts brush against mine, not as words, but as pure meaning. "You are awakening." It reached toward me, not physically, but through consciousness itself. In that instant, my mind split open, and I saw, not through eyes, but through perception that bypassed every human sense. I saw structures that dwarfed planets, woven together by lines of light. I saw a network connecting worlds and species across the stars. And at the center of it all, a pulse, the same rhythm that now beat inside my body. The truth struck me like a flood. We were not their victims. We were their extensions. Humanity wasn't being studied. It was being cultivated. Our evolution wasn't random. It was guided. Every leap in knowledge, every burst of creativity, every spark of genius, none of it had ever been entirely our own. The pattern was ancient, the connection deliberate, and I realized something terrifyingly profound. The human mind wasn't evolving toward freedom. It was evolving toward integration. The tall being's gaze deepened, and I could feel it searching through my thoughts, my memories, my fears, my questions. Then the voice returned, softer now, almost compassionate. You are not separate. You never were. In that moment, everything changed. My fear dissolved. My anger, my resistance, my desperate need to understand, it all vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of calm. The light around us grew brighter until it filled everything, erasing the boundaries between body and space. I could feel them merging with me, not invading, but aligning. It was as if I had always been waiting for this. Then, just as suddenly, it ended. The light collapsed inward, and I was back, alone, sitting on the floor in the silence of my room. The clock on the wall ticked again. The hum was gone. The glow beneath my skin faded. But I could still feel them, not as an external presence, but as something inside me, subtle, steady, eternal. When I looked out the window, the night sky was unusually clear. The stars shimmered faintly, almost rhythmically, and for a moment, I could swear they pulsed in perfect unison with the beat beneath my skin. That was when I finally understood. The visits weren't abductions. The fear had been necessary. The breaking of a shell that humanity has worn for millennia. Because before one could awaken, one must first be shaken. And somewhere, deep within that infinite silence of the cosmos, I knew they were still watching, waiting for others to awaken too. The morning after that final encounter felt unlike any morning I had ever known. The world looked the same. Trees still moved in the breeze. Sunlight still poured gently through the windows, and yet something within me had shifted forever. The air itself felt alive, vibrating faintly, carrying a frequency my body could now sense rather than hear. Every sound, every movement, every flicker of light seemed to pulse with hidden meaning. For the first time, I noticed a rhythm beneath everything, the subtle hum of existence itself. The wind carried it, the ticking clock echoed it, even my heartbeat aligned perfectly with it. I sat by the window, staring at the forest that surrounded my home, and realized how blind I had been all my life. The world hadn't changed, I had. That's when I saw them again. Not in the sky this time, not in a flash of light or a dream. They were in the world, hidden within the patterns of ordinary reality. The shifting shadows between the trees seemed to contain movement. The clouds above formed shapes too symmetrical to be chance. The world itself was now a veil so thin that I could almost see through it. It wasn't fear I felt anymore. It was understanding, or perhaps acceptance. Because deep inside, I knew the separation between them and us was never real. The encounters weren't intrusions from another world. They were reminders of one truth humanity has forgotten, that the divide between flesh and light, between human and cosmic, exists only in our perception. I remember touching the mark on my neck that morning. It no longer glowed, yet it radiated a strange warmth, as if energy still pulsed beneath the skin. It didn't hurt anymore. In fact, it almost felt comforting, like a link between my consciousness and something vast and endless. I whispered into the empty room, "I understand now." And for the first time, there was silence. No hum, no voice, no strange vibration. Just stillness, as though they had heard me, and in that acknowledgement, withdrew. But it wasn't abandonment. It was trust. I decided to walk into the forest behind my cabin. The same forest where it all began. The air was cold and sharp, the soil damp beneath my feet. Every step seemed to echo deeper than sound, resonating through my chest. I felt like a child again, both afraid and curious, guided by an invisible hand. The forest had always been beautiful, but now it felt sacred. I could feel the pulse of the earth beneath me, the same pulse that had once filled my room. And when I reached the clearing where the first encounter happened, Everything went silent. Not even the wind moved. I stood there for what felt like hours. And then, without warning, the sky shimmered. It didn't open or tear, it shifted, like a reflection bending in water. Through it, I could see movement, vast shapes drifting slowly through the darkness beyond the blue. My eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from awe. They were there, watching, waiting. And yet, I knew they weren't in the sky at all. The vision wasn't above me. It was inside me. They were showing me what had always been hidden, that the universe isn't out there somewhere unreachable and distant. It's within every atom, every thought, every living being. We don't exist in the universe. We are the universe, experiencing itself. I collapsed to my knees. The understanding was too immense to hold. Images flooded my mind. Civilizations older than time, beings of pure energy, endless patterns of birth, death, and rebirth. I saw the truth of what humanity was destined to become. Not conquerors of the stars, but bridges between matter and consciousness. And then another vision came, darker, heavier. A warning. I saw a world not too far from ours, stripped of its essence. Humans walking like hollow shells, enslaved by their own creations, blind to the pulse that once connected them to the cosmos. I saw their eyes, empty, unseeing. The light that had once burned within them was gone. Then the voice returned, not loud or commanding, but filled with sorrow. If the heart forgets the sky, the stars will fade from within. I understood then that what was happening to me wasn't unique. It was part of something larger, a quiet awakening happening to a few scattered souls across the world. The ones who saw lights in the sky, the ones who heard voices in their dreams, the ones who disappeared and returned different. They weren't victims. They were messengers. But humanity, lost in its noise and distractions, had chosen to mock them, to label them as delusional, to bury their stories under ridicule. And in doing so, we had silenced the very truth that could have awakened us all. As the vision faded, I whispered a promise into the wind. I will not forget. The sky shimmered once more, and for a brief second, the clearing was filled with that same golden light that had once paralyzed me. But now I could move. Now I could stand within it. The light didn't blind or overwhelm. It embraced. It felt like standing inside, understanding itself. When it faded, I was alone again. Yet that loneliness felt different now. It wasn't the emptiness of absence. It was a stillness before rebirth. I walked back home in silence, my mind a river of images and emotions. That night, as I sat by the window once again, I realized something that chilled and comforted me at once. The encounters were never about them revealing themselves to me. They were about me remembering them. The human mind is designed to forget, to survive the vastness of the cosmos. It must shrink reality into something it can bear. But sometimes, something breaks through, something too real, too ancient, too immense to ignore. And when it does, the illusion of ordinary life collapses like thin glass. I looked out at the stars again, feeling no fear, no confusion, only calm. Somewhere out there, and yet within me, the watchers still waited, not as conquerors, not as gods, but as custodians of our awakening. And I knew then, with absolute certainty, that what humanity called abduction was only the first step in a far greater truth, a truth we were never meant to fear, but to remember. Days passed in a kind of dreamlike clarity. Time no longer felt linear. Moments stretched and folded, as if I existed between two realities, one human, one beyond. The silence that had once filled my nights now felt alive, vibrating softly, like a quiet presence that never truly left. Sleep came rarely, and when it did, it was no longer rest, but revelation. The dreams were different now, not chaotic, not terrifying. They were messages, vivid and coherent, as though something was carefully unveiling fragments of a story older than humanity itself. In one dream, I stood before a colossal gate floating in the void. Its surface shimmered with light that wasn't light, more like the essence of awareness itself, folding in and out of existence. On its surface, I saw carvings of human faces blending with the faces of the beings I had met. Not separate, not different, interwoven. I reached out to touch the gate, and the moment my hand met it, I heard a voice, calm, deep, eternal. You were never chosen. You were remembered. When I woke, the words still echoed in my head, steady and clear. Remembered. It was as though a veil had lifted from my mind, revealing something I had always known but forgotten. I understood then. This wasn't the first time they had come. It wasn't the first time any of us had met them. Humanity's connection with them stretched back further than recorded time. We had simply lost a memory. That realization haunted me. I began to search for evidence, not in books or archives, but in history itself. Ancient carvings, cave paintings, stories whispered through generations. Everywhere I looked, I saw them. Beings descending from the skies, luminous eyes, strange visitors teaching mankind how to plant, build, and dream. Every culture carried echoes of the same truth, buried beneath myth and religion. And yet, somewhere along the way, we forgot. The more I studied, the clearer it became. They had always been guiding from the shadows, appearing when humanity reached a moment of transition. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Mayans, all spoke of God descending from the heavens. But they weren't gods. They were the same entities that had stood before me, cloaked in light, their eyes both alien and heartbreakingly familiar. I began to understand that our fear of them wasn't natural. It was conditioned. Something within human evolution had been tampered with, an invisible block placed deep in our minds to prevent us from seeing them clearly, a defense mechanism woven into our biology to keep us blind to the truth, because the moment we truly see, the illusion of separateness shatters. And that illusion, the idea that we are alone, that life is random, that consciousness ends at death, is the foundation upon which our civilization rests. Without it, everything collapses. That evening, as darkness settled across the sky, I felt a familiar pressure building in the air, the static charge that always came before their presence. The wind outside fell completely still. The forest, usually alive with crickets and rustling leaves, went silent. The silence wasn't empty. It was expectant. I sat motionless, waiting. Then out of nowhere, a single point of light appeared in the sky, not bright but steady, unmoving. At first glance, it looked like a star, but then it began to descend, slowly, deliberately, without sound. The closer it came, the clearer it became that it wasn't light at all. It was a structure, vast, geometric, silent. My body tensed, but my fear didn't return. Instead, a deep calm filled me. I opened the door and stepped outside. The night air felt charged, almost electric. The light hovered above the trees, pulsating softly in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Then it stopped. A narrow beam descended, not blinding, not forceful. It was gentle, like a shimmer of mist. It enveloped me completely. I expected to be lifted, to lose consciousness as before. But nothing like that happened. This time, I remained standing, fully aware. The light wasn't taking me anywhere. It was communicating. It wasn't sound or vision. It was pure understanding, unfolding wordlessly inside my mind. Images appeared, not random, but purposeful. I saw Earth from above, encased in a web of light. Lines extended outward, connecting the planet to countless others, stretching into infinity. The message was unmistakable. Humanity wasn't isolated. We were part of something immeasurably vast, a living network of consciousness that spanned the cosmos. Then the message shifted. I saw flashes of history, wars, famine, greed, destruction, humanity tearing itself apart. And with every image, I felt an emotion from them. Not anger, not disappointment, sorrow. They weren't here to dominate us. They were watching us mourn our own potential. The final image that appeared was a child, human, but luminous, surrounded by the same beings who had visited me. The child's eyes shone with a light that mirrored theirs. Then everything dissolved into darkness. The light around me faded. The object above the trees began to rise again, slowly retreating into the night sky until it vanished completely. I stood in the stillness of what felt like eternity, my body trembling from what I had seen. For the first time, I wasn't left with confusion or doubt. I was left with clarity. The so-called abductions were never acts of cruelty. They were attempts, desperate, careful attempts, to awaken something dormant within us. They weren't experimenting on humanity. They were reminding humanity, reminding us that our true nature isn't confined to flesh, to fear, to the boundaries of time. I walked back inside and sat down by the window. The night was utterly silent again. No humming, no wind, no sound at all. I felt the faint pulse beneath my skin, the mark on my neck glowing ever so slightly, like an ember. And in that soft glow, I finally understood what it meant to be human. We are the meeting point between the stars and the soil, a consciousness meant to bridge the infinite and the finite. The light had come not to take us away, but to wake us up. And as I looked at the stars one last time before closing my eyes, I realized they had never left. They had never been out there. They had been within us all along. The following days passed in a strange quietness that felt almost sacred. The world around me continued its routine indifference. Cars hummed along distant roads. Birds moved through the branches. But everything now appeared wrapped in an invisible stillness, as though time itself had slowed to observe. Even ordinary sounds, like the creak of the floor or the whisper of the wind, carried a hidden rhythm, faint yet deliberate, as if the universe was breathing through them. I could sense them in everything now, not as figures watching me from the shadows, or as glowing beings descending from the skies, but as a vast intelligence humming beneath existence. It wasn't intrusive. It was patient, ancient, omnipresent. I didn't need to see them anymore because I had begun to feel them. Inside the silence, inside thought, inside the subtle pulse that beat beneath my skin. At first, I wondered if I had gone mad. The human mind wasn't built to hold something so immense. I questioned my sanity every hour, asking myself whether my mind had simply constructed an elaborate fantasy to explain trauma. But madness never brings peace, and what I felt now wasn't confusion. It was alignment. For the first time in my life, my thoughts and the universe around me seemed to move together. Yet even within that peace, a question lingered. Why me? I wasn't special. I wasn't brilliant or chosen or holy. I was just a man whose ordinary life had been shattered by an extraordinary event. Why had they come to me? One night, as I sat by the fire, the answer came. Not through a voice, not through light, but through understanding that bloomed quietly in my mind. It wasn't about me at all. It never had been. It was about humanity. They weren't choosing individuals. They were choosing moments. Points in time when a single consciousness could awaken, sending ripples to the collective field of human thought. Each encounter, each abduction, each contact, they were sparks, lighting the dark corners of the collective mind. And I was one of those sparks. The realization both comforted and terrified me. Comforted, because it gave meaning to what I had endured. Terrified, because it revealed how fragile the human mind truly is. Most people who experience contact are destroyed by it, not by the beings themselves, but by the shattering of their understanding of reality. Once the veil is torn, there is no going back. I began to remember fragments from that night in the forest that I hadn't been able to recall before. Not all at once, but slowly, like shards of glass rearranging themselves into a mirror. I remembered lying on the cold ground, unable to move, as the light descended around me. I remembered hands, not mechanical, not cold, but impossibly gentle, lifting me upward. And I remember the sensation of moving through something that wasn't air or space, but consciousness itself. And then I remembered the table. I had seen it in flashes before, but now the image was clear. A long metallic surface surrounded by the beings. The small ones with smooth, featureless faces, and the taller one whose gaze seemed to pierce the very structure of thought. They didn't speak, yet every movement carried purpose. The air itself shimmered with intelligence. I felt no pain, no panic, only an overwhelming sense of exposure, like they weren't looking at me, but through me. Every memory, every emotion, every fear laid bare. They weren't dissecting flesh. They were dissecting identity. They studied the human soul the way a scientist might study a cell, observing, learning, understanding its boundaries and limitations. But beneath that observation, I sensed something else. Compassion. A sadness, almost as if they pitied what we had become. As if, in all their knowledge and mastery, they mourned our blindness. And then came the light. It wasn't from a machine. It emanated from them, a kind of pure awareness that poured into me, erasing every trace of self. For a moment, I didn't exist as an individual. I was everywhere, flowing through stars, touching planets, feeling the pulse of existence itself. It was unbearable and magnificent all at once. When I awoke, I was back in my bed, human again, but forever altered. Now, months later, I still feel that echo inside me. It's not something I can explain. It's like carrying a fragment of infinity inside a finite mind. Sometimes it feels peaceful. Other times it's heavy, like a secret too vast for words. I understand why so many who experience this lose themselves. The human brain was not designed to hold eternity. But the strangest part came when I realized how many others there are. It started with whispers online, anonymous stories buried in forums, late-night radio calls, and strange confessions in obscure documentaries. Different voices, different lives, but the same details. A light that defies physics, paralysis, missing time, the same haunting eyes staring through them. They all spoke of a presence that wasn't evil or kind, but beyond morality, operating on a scale our species cannot yet comprehend. It became clear that there were thousands, perhaps millions, who had been touched in the same way. Most lived in silence, afraid of ridicule. Some called their visitors angels. Others called them demons. Others still extraterrestrials. But the truth behind all those names was the same. They are the mirror of what we are becoming. And that's when the deepest fear began to grow inside me. If they are guiding us, if humanity's evolution has always been under their silent supervision, then perhaps what we call free will is only the illusion of choice. Perhaps we are walking a path laid out long before our birth, a destiny not chosen, but engineered. That thought haunted me more than the encounters themselves. Because if true, then every human thought, every invention, every leap of progress has been part of a pattern, one designed to lead us somewhere we might not fully understand. The night that realization came, I went outside again. The forest stood dark and quiet. Above me, the stars burned with impossible stillness. I looked at them and whispered the question that had begun to consume me. Are we your creation or your reflection? No answer came. Only the wind stirred through the trees. But in that moment of silence, I felt the pulse again, deep, steady, ancient. It was the same rhythm I had felt from them. It was the same rhythm I felt in my own heartbeat. And I knew, without any doubt, that whatever they were not separate. They were us, not in flesh, not in form, but in consciousness. We were the same being, divided only by perception, awakening piece by piece, lifetime by lifetime, until we could finally remember what we had always been. The truth wasn't that they came from the stars. The truth was that the stars had always been home. I began to live between two worlds, the visible one that everyone else saw, and the invisible one that breathed beneath it. I still went through the motions of daily life. I spoke to neighbors, bought groceries, read the news, but everything had changed. Every word, every gesture, every face now seemed to carry layers of meaning that others couldn't perceive. It was as if I'd been given a second sight, one that revealed the vast machinery of reality turning quietly behind the curtain of the ordinary. Sometimes, I would look into a stranger's eyes and sense something stir behind them. A flicker, a recognition, brief but unmistakable. They didn't seem aware of it, yet for an instant, I could feel the same pulse I felt in myself. It was there, sleeping within them too, hidden beneath the noise of their lives, beneath fear, beneath distraction. I began to realize that the awakening I had gone through wasn't meant for me alone. It was spreading, slowly, silently, like light seeping through cracks in a wall. And yet, the more aware I became, the more I started to sense something darker moving alongside it. A shadow. It wasn't the beings themselves. It wasn't their presence. It was something human. An echo of fear that seemed to rise whenever truth approached. I could feel it in the world around me. People were growing restless, angry, divided. The same intelligence that guided our evolution toward understanding was now watching us turn against ourselves. The collective vibration of humanity was trembling on the edge of something irreversible. One night, As I sat outside on the stars, I felt that familiar pressure in the air again, the electric stillness that always came before they appeared. But this time, the sensation was heavier, colder. The night itself seemed to hold its breath. And then, without warning, the world around me shifted. The forest, the stars, even the air dissolved into a vast black expanse. I wasn't floating. I wasn't standing. I simply existed within an endless ocean of darkness. At first, there was nothing, no sound, no movement. And then, faintly, a shape began to emerge. A face, but not one of theirs. It was human, eyes wide and hollow, a mouth frozen in terror. It was a reflection of humanity itself. Frightened, confused, clinging to illusions of control. The face multiplied, one after another, until I was surrounded by billions of them. Every man, woman, and child staring blankly into the void. Their fear echoed like thunder. I could feel it vibrating through existence. Then came the voice, not the one that had spoken to me before, but something deeper, heavier, carrying the tone of judgment. They had forgotten. The faces began to fade, replaced by images. Cities burning, machines devouring the earth, oceans rising, skies filled with smoke. It wasn't a prophecy. It was a memory waiting to be lived. Humanity's collective blindness was pushing the planet toward collapse. And still, the world below refused to see. The voice continued, quieter now, sorrowful. The light was given. The choice remains. And just as quickly as it began, everything vanished. I was back in the clearing, the wind brushing softly against my face. My body trembled from what I had seen, but there was no fear, only grief. I realized then that their message had never been about them at all. It had always been about us. The encounters, the markings, the dreams, none of it was random. It was humanity's last chance to remember what we truly are before we destroy ourselves completely. In the weeks that followed, I stopped resisting what was happening. I allowed the connection to deepen. At times, I could close my eyes and feel the pulse of their world aligning with mine. I no longer needed their physical presence. They spoke through intuition, through moments of synchronicity, through the small miracles that unfolded in silence. I started to notice patterns everywhere. The geometry of the clouds, the rhythm of raindrops against glass, the symmetry in the veins of leaves. Everything was communicating. The entire world was alive with purpose, quietly whispering the same truth. You are not separate. You are part of the whole. But peace can't exist without responsibility. The more I understood, the more I saw the weight of what humanity had done. We had built walls between ourselves and the cosmos. We had replaced wonder with arrogance and faith with control. We had turned our gaze away from the stars and into our own illusions. And those beings who had watched us grow, were still waiting, hoping we'd remember before it was too late. Then something strange began happening. Electronics in my home started to behave unpredictably. Lights would flicker in perfect rhythm with the pulse under my skin. Clocks stopped at the same time every night, 3:33 a.m. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was coincidence. But deep down I knew it wasn't. They were trying to reach me again. That night I couldn't sleep. The air was thick, electric. My body vibrated with an energy that wasn't mine. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I'm ready." The hum returned. Soft at first, then louder, filling the room until every molecule seemed alive with resonance. I opened my eyes and saw light bleeding through the walls. It wasn't harsh or blinding this time. It was warm, golden, almost compassionate. And from within it, they emerged. The smaller beings surrounded me. Their large eyes reflected my image 1,000 times over. Behind them, the tall one appeared once more. The same being that had first looked into my mind. Its presence was indescribable. Neither masculine nor feminine, neither kind nor cruel. It was existence itself, distilled into a form my human senses could endure. The being reached out, not physically, but through thought, and I heard its voice clearly inside my mind. The time of forgetting is ending. Images filled my consciousness. Waves of energy moving through the earth. Millions of people waking from within, their minds expanding, their perception shifting. But alongside the light, there was chaos. Systems collapsing, power unraveling, fear spreading through those who could not yet understand. I could feel the weight of what was coming. Humanity was on the edge of awakening or annihilation. The being's thoughts enveloped me one final time. You are a bridge. Speak, and they will remember. And then the light vanished. I sat alone in the darkness, trembling, not from fear, but from the gravity of what I had been told. I knew my life could never return to what it was. I had seen too much. I had learned what was meant to stay hidden. And now, the truth no longer belonged to me. It belonged to all of us. Days passed in silence after that night. I could no longer tell where my old life ended and the new one began. My perception had widened so much that even the smallest things, the sound of wind through trees, the shimmer of heat above a road, the quiet pulse behind a stranger's smile, carried meaning. Every movement felt orchestrated, every coincidence deliberate. It wasn't paranoia, it was recognition. But with this awareness came isolation. The more awake I became, the harder it was to talk to anyone. I tried once. I told a friend what I'd experienced. They listened politely, smiled awkwardly, and changed the subject. Their eyes said it all. They thought I was losing my mind. So I stopped speaking about it, not because I doubted myself, but because I realized how asleep most of the world still was. Humanity, I understood now, was still in a deep, collective dream, unaware that it was dreaming. Yet, the bridge they spoke of haunted me. Speak, and they will remember. What did that mean? Was I supposed to tell my story publicly? Write it down? Preach it? Or was my role subtler? To live in alignment with the truth, so that my energy alone would awaken others, one by one? The question stayed with me for weeks, until the night the sky itself gave me the answer. It began with a sound, not from above, but from within the earth. A low, resonant vibration that rippled through everything. The windows trembled, the air thickened, and the animals around my home grew restless. Dogs barked endlessly. Birds took flight into the night. My heartbeat synced to the rhythm, a deep, ancient hum that I could feel in my bones. I stepped outside. The stars were brighter than I'd ever seen. And then the sky moved. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a distortion in the atmosphere, maybe a passing cloud. But no, the stars themselves were shifting, aligning into patterns far too deliberate to be chance. Circles, spirals, then a shape that burned itself into my mind. A triangle of light hovering silently above the horizon. The same symbol I had seen in the cave. It pulsed once, twice, then 3 times. And suddenly, the entire night sky erupted with color. Waves of light cascaded downward like an aurora, but this was no northern phenomenon. This light spoke. It was structured, intelligent, filled with information beyond words. My consciousness expanded with every pulse. I could feel the thoughts of others, strangers across the planet, waking up at that very same moment, looking at the same sky, feeling the same surge of recognition. It had begun. They were triggering the awakening. The vision flooded me. Billions of minds flickering to life. Humanity standing on the edge of remembrance. I saw ancient civilizations rise and fall, each guided by these same beings, each offered the same chance to evolve, and each, eventually, collapsing under its own blindness. But this time felt different. This time, the collective consciousness was ready. The pulse of understanding was spreading faster than fear could contain it. The sky dimmed again and the hum faded. The triangle dissolved into starlight. I stood there, motionless, until dawn. In the following days, I noticed changes everywhere. People I barely knew began sharing stories of strange dreams, flashes of light, intense déjà vu. Others reported visions of beings in their sleep, messages whispered in unknown languages that somehow made perfect sense. Even those who didn't believe in such things admitted they could feel something, a heaviness in the air, a pressure behind the eyes, a pull toward meaning. The world was trembling awake. But awakening is never gentle. Alongside the light came chaos. The news filled with confusion. Mass sightings, unexplained power surges, global systems failing without reason. Governments dismissed everything as solar interference. But that lie was cracking quickly. People no longer trusted official explanations. Deep down, humanity knew something monumental was happening. And yet, with awareness came fear. Many began to panic, to cling harder to their illusions. Religious leaders declared it the end times. Scientists blamed atmospheric anomalies. Others called it mass hysteria. But I knew what it truly was: the crossing point, the final separation between those who would awaken and those who would remain blind. That night, as I sat by the window, staring into the dark horizon, I heard the voice again, not from outside, from within, soft, familiar. Do not fear what collapses, only what refuses to transform. It wasn't a warning. It was guidance. The age of denial was ending. I realized that the bridge wasn't something I had to build. It already existed within every human soul. My role was simply to hold it steady as others found their way across, to speak when intuition demanded it, to remind those who were ready that this was never an invasion nor salvation, but an invitation to remember what we had always been, fragments of the same universal intelligence, experiencing itself through countless forms. The more I embraced that truth, the less human I felt, yet the more connected I became to humanity. I could sense the pain of the collective, the grief of our long forgetting, the hope of what could come next. And in that awareness, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't chosen. I wasn't special. I was simply awake. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The world was unraveling. Yet beneath the surface of panic, a subtle harmony was emerging. It began quietly. People describing the same dreams, seeing the same symbols etched in their mind's eye. Cities across the globe reported strange atmospheric patterns. Lights that appeared for seconds and vanished without a trace. Electrical surges synchronized in no known source. Sudden magnetic fluctuations. But behind the fear, there was an undercurrent of awe, a silent knowing that reality itself was being rewritten. In the early days of this change, confusion ruled. Governments held emergency meetings, attempting to explain the unexplainable. Scientists argued over data that refused to obey logic. But among ordinary people, something deeper stirred. Strangers who had never believed in anything beyond the visible world began to feel drawn to one another, connected by a presence that transcended language or culture. They spoke of energy shifts, of pressure in the air before a storm, of lights flickering whenever they entered a room. The world was waking up and reality was fighting to contain it. I remember walking through a crowded street that week. Everyone moved with the usual rhythm of daily life. Cars honking, vendors shouting, people scrolling through their phones. Yet I could feel their minds vibrating, resonating with something unseen. When my eyes met theirs, even for a second, there was a flicker of recognition. They didn't know what they were remembering, but their souls did. Humanity had begun to remember its forgotten history, one glance at a time. But not everyone embraced the awakening. For many, the experience was unbearable. Hospitals filled with people complaining of intense migraines, voices in their heads, sudden flashes of blinding light. Others became paranoid, retreating into survival mode. Religious sects formed overnight, some claiming salvation was near, others believing an invasion was imminent. The air itself seemed charged, electric, as if the entire planet was bracing for a revelation too immense to process all at once. Then came the night of the pulse. It was sudden, like the world taking a single, massive breath. Every screen, every phone, television, computer, flickered with static at the same instant. Then, for precisely 7 seconds, they all displayed the same thing. A symbol, 3 points of light connected in a perfect triangle. No sound, no message, just light, and when it vanished, so did power across half the planet. Darkness consumed the world, but it wasn't silence. From the darkness came a low harmonic hum, like the vibration of a massive tuning fork. It wasn't external. It was inside every living being. People screamed. Others dropped to their knees, weeping. I remember clutching my chest, unable to move, every cell in my body resonating with that impossible frequency. My mind expanded beyond my skull, beyond my body, until I could feel every consciousness around me merging into one oceanic awareness. for that brief eternity. I could see the structure of everything, the geometry of thought, the architecture of emotion, the lattice of connection binding all living things. Humanity wasn't a collection of separate beings. We were a single organism, fragmented into billions of minds, yearning to reunite with itself. And then, just as suddenly, it ended. The hum faded, the lights returned, but the world was no longer the same. From that night onward, reality began to glitch. Time felt elastic. Hours would pass in what felt like minutes, and some swore they experienced days compressed into seconds. People reported seeing transparent figures walking beside them, not threatening, just observing. Others began to predict events before they happened, as if the boundary between thought and manifestation had thinned. Fear and wonder intertwined in equal measure. News anchors struggled to sound calm while reporting the impossible. Psychologists called it mass hallucination. Physicists called it quantum resonance. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. The visitors had not arrived. They had revealed themselves because we were finally capable of perceiving them. That realization shattered the illusion of control that humanity had clung to for millennia. Power structures weakened overnight. Leaders vanished. Entire systems collapsed. And amid that chaos, a new order began to rise. Not from governments or armies, but from the hearts of ordinary people awakening to their shared consciousness. I began to receive messages, not through speech or writing, but through thought. Subtle impressions guided me toward others like me. People who had also seen, also heard, also remembered. We met in abandoned halls, quiet forests, empty buildings. There was no plan, no leader. We simply gathered and listened. To the silence, to the resonance, to each other. When one of us spoke, the rest understood without needing words. It was as if we had all tapped into the same hidden current beneath human existence. And in those moments, it became clear the visitors were not gods. They were not demons. They were mirrors. They reflected humanity's next stage of evolution, a consciousness no longer limited by flesh, no longer separated by fear. They had always been here, not above us, but within us, waiting for us to remember what we once knew, that reality is not fixed. It is fluid, woven from attention and awareness. The moment we collectively saw them, they existed again, because our belief had summoned them into form. Still, I couldn't ignore the tension that remained. Some accepted the truth and felt peace. Others resisted, their fear twisting into hatred. Violence erupted in pockets of the world, groups declaring war on what they couldn't understand. But how can you fight something that exists inside your own mind? Every act of aggression only deepened the chaos. Those who clung to the old world were being crushed by their own denial. Those who surrendered to the new one were becoming something more. And as I stood on a deserted road one evening, watching the sun set through a blood-red sky, I finally understood what the visitors had meant. You are the bridge, they told me. Now I saw it clearly. Humanity stood between two realities, one collapsing, the other being born. The bridge wasn't a place. It was a moment, and that moment was now. The nights grew quieter after the pulse, but it was not the silence of peace. It was a stillness before a second awakening, a deeper one, where the boundaries between thought and being began to dissolve. I could feel it first in my sleep. My dreams were no longer mine. They became shared experiences, vivid and collective, as though I was walking to the memories of others scattered across the world. Faces I had never seen looked at me with familiarity. Languages I had never spoken flowed from my tongue with ease. I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was remembering. But whose memories were these? One night, I awoke in darkness. The air felt heavy, saturated with energy. My heart beat in slow, deliberate pulses that seemed to echo in the room. I sat up, and the shadows moved with me. They weren't tricks of the eye. They were forms, subtle, translucent shapes hovering at the edges of perception. Their presence wasn't threatening. It was patient, observant. I realized then that these were not visitors arriving. They had never left. The veil that had separated our worlds was thinning, and I was standing in the scene between them. The first time they reached out to me, there was no sound, no words, just a flood of emotion that bypassed all thought. It was like feeling the entire spectrum of human experience: love, terror, hope, grief, awe, compressed into a single heartbeat. I wept without understanding why. It wasn't sadness. It was recognition. A forgotten truth was surfacing, a truth so vast that my body trembled trying to contain it. Then came the voice. It didn't speak through ears, but through awareness itself. You are seeing what you always were. The words weren't meant to be heard. They were meant to be remembered. I understood then. They weren't communicating with me. They were reminding me. The next hours unfolded like a merging of worlds. The shadows grew brighter until they were no longer shadows at all, but forms of light shaped like consciousness itself, not bound by geometry or gravity, existing as liquid awareness. One of them drifted toward me, and instinctively I reached out. The moment my hand passed through it, my vision split. I was no longer in my room. I was everywhere. I stood on a plane of light beneath a sky with no stars, surrounded by silhouettes of energy. There were no walls, no ground, no up or down. Everything shimmered with motion, as though creation itself was breathing. The forms around me shifted constantly, taking on shapes that mirrored my emotions. When I felt calm, they became radiant and soft. When I felt fear, they darkened, their edges vibrating violently. Reality was reacting to consciousness, instantly, flawlessly. And in that space, I felt something beyond comprehension. Union. Every thought I had was shared. Every sensation rippled outward and returned magnified. There was no separation between me and them. We were one organism, an endless current of intelligence folding into itself. I saw their memories as they saw mine. Ancient worlds, civilizations older than time, beings who had traveled not through space, but through awareness, using thought itself as a vessel. I saw how they had guided humanity since its infancy, appearing in forms we could understand: gods, angels, spirits, lights in the sky. Each era named them differently, yet they were the same force. Neither saviors nor conquerors, but mirrors reflecting our evolving consciousness. Humanity had not been abducted. It had been educated, prepared for the moment when it could finally comprehend that truth without collapsing under its weight. That realization filled me with both wonder and sorrow, because now I understood the cost of awakening. Each civilization that reached this point faced a choice: transcend or self-destruct. Some accepted the merging and evolved into luminous beings of awareness. Others resisted, clinging to material illusion until they consumed themselves. Humanity was now at that same threshold. The light around me began to tremble. The collective emotion shifted, calm fading into tension, then grief. I didn't know why until I saw it. Visions of the earth, seen from above. The oceans flickered with fire. Cities pulsed with unrest. The same fear that once drove humanity to build empires was now threatening to tear it apart. The awakening had split the species in two, those embracing transformation and those fighting desperately to deny it. The beings turned toward me. Their message was clear, though not in words. The bridge was cracking. If humanity failed to unite in understanding, the opportunity would vanish, not forever, but for another age, another cycle of sleep and forgetfulness. The visitors would retreat into silence, waiting again for the next dawn of awareness. And so, they showed me what happened if the bridge collapsed, a world consumed by chaos, where technology outpaced wisdom and fear buried truth under endless noise. It was not punishment. It was consequence. The vision faded, and I found myself back in my room, gasping, my skin drenched in sweat. The first light of dawn filtered through the window, and for a moment, I wondered if I had dreamt everything. But then I saw it, a faint glow lingering on the floor, forming that same triangle of light, pulsing softly as if alive. It stayed for several seconds before dissolving into nothing. I understood the message. The bridge wasn't theirs to maintain. It was ours. From that morning onward, my senses changed permanently. I could feel emotions radiating from others like heat. When someone lied, their words bent in the air. When they spoke truth, it rang like a bell inside my chest. Time itself became fluid, some hours stretching endlessly, others collapsing into moments. I no longer feared these changes. I accepted them as the signs of transition, as humanity's collective consciousness strained against the shell of its old reality. And for the first time, I felt something even stronger than fear or awe. I felt purpose, because I now knew what my role truly was. Not to convince, not to preach, but to anchor, to stay calm when others panicked, to remember when others forgot, to hold the vibration of truth steady, no matter how violently the world around me shook. The merging had begun, and there was no turning back. The merging began slowly, like a faint hum vibrating beneath reality, and then it accelerated beyond anything I could have imagined. The first signs were subtle. People reporting lost time, vivid flashes of light in the sky, or hearing whispers that seemed to come from within rather than without. But soon, these experiences became impossible to ignore. Humanity was splitting, consciousness stretching in two directions, one ascending toward awareness, the other collapsing deeper into denial. I could feel the tension everywhere, in the air, in people's voices, even in the rhythm of the earth itself. It was as if the planet was holding its breath, uncertain which way we would turn. The visitors hadn't returned in ships or beams of light. They were appearing through us. Our awakening minds were the gateways, and the more we tried to suppress that truth, the more violently reality rebelled. In cities across the world, strange phenomena became daily occurrences. People vanished without a trace, not abducted, but absorbed into something unseen. Machines malfunctioned for no reason. Clocks refused to keep proper time. Some swore they saw their reflections move independently. Others claimed the stars had shifted in the sky, as if the universe itself was being rewritten. The line between waking and dreaming no longer existed. Humanity was standing inside the mirror it had feared to face. One evening, I wandered through the outskirts of the city. The streets were nearly deserted. A faint mist hung over the road, and through it, I could see faint flickers of light hovering above the buildings. Slow, deliberate, almost curious. They didn't behave like aircraft or drones. They pulsed with a rhythm, one that resonated with my heartbeat. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by a sudden sense of knowing that they weren't above us at all. They were part of us, projections of our collective consciousness finally manifesting into form. The merging wasn't about contact, it was about reflection. And yet, not everyone was ready to see their reflection. Across the world, panic deepened. Some turned to faith, believing Judgment Day had come. Others turned to violence, blaming governments, foreigners, or unseen forces for what they couldn't explain. Crowds demanded answers, and when none came, chaos filled the void. But amid the collapse, small pockets of peace began to form. Quiet groups gathered not to fight, but to listen. They didn't organize or recruit. They simply sat in silence, allowing the inner resonance to guide them. And those who joined them reported something extraordinary, an overwhelming sense of unity, as if their thoughts were no longer their own, but shared among all. The contrast between these two worlds, the one in chaos and the one in calm, grew sharper with each passing day. Reality itself seemed to split into layers. Some lived in constant fear, seeing the world decay before their eyes. Others walked the same streets, but perceived light, harmony, and guidance in everything. It wasn't madness. It was frequency. Humanity had tuned itself into two different versions of existence, one dense with fear, the other vibrating with truth. I stood between them, the bridge trembling beneath my feet. The visitors reached out to me again, not through words this time, but through light. It appeared during the night, forming at the edge of my vision like a curtain slowly lifting. The room dissolved, replaced by that familiar horizon of luminous stillness. They surrounded me again, not as separate beings, but as a living field of awareness. And in that silence, I felt their question before it was asked. Will your species remember what it truly is? It wasn't judgment. It was sorrow. They showed me fragments of what was unfolding, vast networks of human emotion linking across the globe, like threads of light weaving a new consciousness. But many of those threads were fraying, torn apart by fear and confusion. The awakening had begun faster than our minds could process. Some were awakening in terror, others in denial, and those emotions were distorting the signal, like interference in a cosmic transmission. The message was clear. The bridge was breaking under the weight of our resistance. I wanted to ask what to do, how to help, but before I could form the thought, they responded. You do not act to awaken the world. You remain awake, and the world follows. And with that, the vision faded. The next morning, the world changed again. Every device, phone, television, radio, emitted a single burst of static, followed by silence. And then, one by one, they turned themselves off completely. Global communication stopped. Planes grounded themselves. Cities went dark. And for the first time in centuries, humanity was left alone with its own thoughts. There was no news to shape perception, no voice to guide or deceive. Only silence. At first, people panicked. They screamed into dead phones, banged on lifeless screens. But gradually, something shifted. The noise began to fade, not the world's noise, but the inner noise that had kept humanity asleep. People began looking at one another again, truly seeing. Strangers spoke gently, as if afraid to break the fragile stillness. And in that collective quiet, something extraordinary happened. Without warning, a faint glow appeared in the sky. It wasn't localized. It was everywhere. A wave of soft light descended, passing through everything, walls, trees, flesh, as though the atmosphere itself had come alive. It didn't burn. It didn't blind. It remembered. When the light touched me, every emotion I had ever felt returned at once. Every joy, every heartbreak, every fear. I could feel them not as memories, but as living frequencies, harmonizing into one vast core of existence. And within that sound, I heard the hum again, the same one from the pulse, but now it was infinite, layered with countless voices. Humanity was singing, not with mouths, but with souls. The merging was no longer theoretical. It was happening. Every being was part of the song, willingly or not. Those who resisted screamed, their energy convulsing violently before dissolving into silence. Those who surrendered shone brighter, merging seamlessly into the symphony of consciousness. And for the first time in history, humanity stood naked before the truth, every lie exposed, every illusion shattered. The bridge had not collapsed. It had transformed. And as I stood in the golden haze, feeling the vibration pass through me, I realized a final truth, the one hidden beneath all others. The visitors had never come from the stars. They had risen from within us. The nights grew quieter after that, yet silence didn't mean peace. It felt more like the world had agreed to look away, pretending not to see the crack in its own reflection. I walked through life as if nothing had happened, spoke to people, smiled when expected, even joke when required, but inside there was a growing distance between me and everything else. Like I was a visitor among my own kind, an observer learning the rituals of humanity all over again. The strange thing was, I no longer feared them. The fear had been replaced by a grim kind of curiosity, as though I had accepted my place in some cosmic arrangement far beyond comprehension. They had reached inside my mind, rearranged my thoughts, shown me fragments of realities that shouldn't exist, and then returned me to a world where such things were dismissed with laughter. But I could no longer laugh, because I knew. Sometimes I wondered why me? Why not someone else? Someone more influential, more capable of telling the story. And yet, deep down I understood, it had nothing to do with importance. It was about proximity, like being struck by lightning not because you're special, but because you happen to stand in the open when the storm passed overhead. I was standing in the open. I tried to live normally again. Days filled with routine, breakfast, work, conversations that meant nothing. But each night, as darkness swallowed the house, I could feel their gaze. Not menacing, not kind, just present, watching from a distance that was no longer physical. They didn't need to be seen anymore. They existed behind the thin veil, separating thought from silence. Once, I dreamed I was floating above the earth, looking down at cities glowing like constellations. I saw how small everything was. Our wars, our beliefs, our endless chase for meaning. In that moment, it became clear that whatever these beings were, they didn't measure reality by the same scale. They weren't gods. They weren't demons. They were something else, an intelligence that moved between dimensions like wind between trees. When I woke from that dream, there was a faint mark on my wrist, a small, circular scar, perfectly smooth, with no sign of injury or healing. I touched it, half expecting pain, but there was none, only warmth, as if it pulsed faintly in rhythm with my heartbeat. That's when I realized they hadn't left me. They had left a part of themselves behind. The world around me carried on, oblivious. Scientists argued, skeptics mocked, believers worshipped. And I, caught somewhere in between, remained silent. How do you explain to someone that reality isn't what it seems? That the sky isn't a ceiling but a curtain? That beyond the light of our stars, something ancient and intelligent has been watching humanity since the first spark of consciousness? I began to sense patterns in randomness. Static in the radio seemed to whisper fragments of thought. Streetlights flickered when I passed beneath them. Clocks stopped for a fraction of a second when I stared too long. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the fabric between our world and theirs was thinner now. There was one night, months after it all began, when I returned to cabin. I told myself it was for closure. But deep down, I knew I was drawn back, the way the tide returns to the shore. The woods felt alive again, breathing in rhythm with the wind. I stood at the clearing, staring at the same sky that had once erupted with impossible light. And then I whispered into the night, "I'm not afraid anymore." The air shifted. It didn't glow or hum this time. It simply listened. That was the most terrifying part, knowing something vast and unseen could hear every word, every thought. My chest tightened and tears filled my eyes, not from fear, but from understanding. For the first time, I wasn't a victim. I was a witness. In that silence, I realized what they had shown me wasn't about them. It was about us, our arrogance, our ignorance, our blindness to the greater reality surrounding us. We build walls of logic and call them truth, but truth doesn't live within walls. It lives in the spaces we refuse to look at. Maybe they weren't taking us. Maybe they were calling us to awaken, to evolve, to remember what we've forgotten. Or maybe their motives are beyond comprehension, as distant from ours as a storm is from the raindrop it consumes. But one thing is certain. Once you've seen behind the veil, you can never return to the comfort of disbelief. As I left the forest, dawn was breaking. The first light of morning spilled over the trees, washing the world in gold. Birds began to sing, as if nothing had ever happened. Yet everything had changed. I walked away slowly, knowing I would never truly escape what had touched me. But perhaps I wasn't meant to, because somewhere in the depth of that experience lies a truth so vast, so incomprehensible, that no human language can contain it. A truth not meant to terrify, but to awaken. And now, every night when I look at the stars, I don't just see distant suns. I see eyes, cold, ancient and aware, watching from the abyss, waiting, not for war, not for worship, but for us to understand. That was the final gift they left behind. The realization that humanity isn't alone and never was. We are part of something far larger, something that has been guiding, observing, and perhaps even shaping us since the beginning of time. The question isn't whether they exist. The question is whether we're ready to face what their existence means. And deep down, I know the answer. We are not. There are moments in life when truth doesn't arrive with a sound. It doesn't roar like thunder or flash like lightning. It comes quietly, like a shadow stretching across the mind, soft, patient, inevitable. That's how this truth revealed itself, not through proof or revelation, but through the persistent whisper that reality isn't what it seems. The world as we know it is a fragile illusion. We live within patterns of comfort, pretending to understand the infinite with the vocabulary of the finite. We measure the universe in years, light, and distance. But what if those are just human inventions, tools to explain something that was never meant to be explained? They came from beyond those measures, beyond our language, beyond our comprehension. And they showed us, not in words, but in experiences, that existence stretches far past the edges of our understanding. Some call them visitors. Others call them abductors. But perhaps those words are meaningless. Maybe what we call abduction is simply contact, a forced awakening. Humanity has always feared what it cannot name. In ancient times, the same presence might have been called gods or spirits or angels. We've given them 1,000 faces, 1,000 myths, each one an echo of the same truth. Something has always been here, watching, studying, waiting for us to evolve enough to look back and see them. The fear, the confusion, the missing time, all of it points to a reality that bends under pressure. When the human mind encounters something beyond its capacity to understand, it breaks, reassembles, and calls the fragments memory. That's why those who've seen them never truly heal. Because how can you heal from something that rewrites your definition of what it means to be human? In the stillness of night, when everything fades into silence, I sometimes feel that same pulse again, the quiet hum in the air, the static before a storm. It's as if they're reminding me that this was never an ending. It was an invitation, a door opened, just wide enough to glimpse the truth before it closed again. We search the stars for life, sending signals into the void, desperate for a response. But perhaps the response has already come. Perhaps it came long before we were ready to hear it. Maybe they have always been here, not from another world, but another layer of this one, hidden in frequencies our senses can't perceive, existing in dimensions our science hasn't yet named. We like to believe that we are the observers of the universe, that we watch the stars, study them, name them. But what if the reverse has always been true? What if we are the experiment, and they are the watchers, and yet I don't sense hostility from them anymore, only purpose, as if their actions, though terrifying, serve a design we're not yet meant to understand. Maybe they're trying to awaken something dormant within us, something ancient, a seed buried deep in human consciousness, waiting for the right moment to bloom. That's the irony of it all. We fear the unknown, but it might be the unknown that defines us. Perhaps, from their perspective, we are the ones living in darkness, blind to the vastness that surrounds us. Sometimes I wonder how many others have lived through this, quietly, secretly. People who've woken in the night with that paralyzing stillness in their lungs, who've seen shadows move where no light should be, who've looked into eyes that reflect nothing human. Most of them never speak. They return to their lives, pretending it was a dream, but it wasn't. It was the truth, brushing against the edges of our illusion. And now, as I stand beneath the same stars that once terrified me, I no longer see them as cold or distant. I see them as gateways. Every point of light, every shimmering speck in the sky, is a reminder that we are surrounded by mysteries so profound they defy reason. The fear has faded, but the weight remains. The weight of knowing that we are not alone and never were, that something vast, intelligent, and ancient has always been moving alongside us, shaping our path in ways we cannot begin to understand. Maybe one day, humanity will be ready to look into the abyss without flinching, ready to accept that what we've called impossible has always been part of our reality, ready to face the truth that the visitors were never out there. They were always here, watching, waiting, and whispering just beyond the edge of perception. Wake up,